My name is Rob Wall, and today we're here for another episode of Book Club, and I am very excited because I am going to be joined once again by the amazing Dr. Caroline Leaf. So all the way from Texas, may I welcome Dr. Caroline Leaf. Caroline, how are you?
I'm so good. Thank you. It's Rob, so good to see you again. We had such a great chat last time, and it's lovely to talk to you again.
Absolutely. And you've just come through not just a pandemic, but also floods, and just how's the last 2 weeks been in Texas?
Been crazy. You can see the effects of climate change. We had this insane snowstorm and the temperatures just dropped to like minus 17 and there was just snow and ice and people's water. We lost water and power for 3 days and Wi-Fi. People were moving into hotels just to survive, and there's been so many deaths, and Texas is just not prepared for anything like this because it's just always a warm climate, even though you have ice storms. But this was exceptional, and the power grids froze, and so it's been a mess. But it's the weather, temperatures are normal again now, and things are getting back to normal. So we got through that. I had to clean up my mental mess a lot with that. I tell you, trying to run a business and run a life, and you're freezing.
That's it. Now you have done my job for me, Dr. Caroline, because we're on this call today because we're going to talk about your brand new book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. Could you just hold out? I think that's
absolutely.
It's the most beautiful book cover I have seen in a very, very long time.
It's thank you. Thank you. I love it too. I think it's fresh and fun.
but let's just talk about what caused you to write this book. So 38 years of research. It's been you've done so much research, but just tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book now, and how's the process of writing it been?
Well, it's been an amazing journey because it really is the culmination of 38 years, as you said, of research in this field of mind, and this search to understand what is mind and what is brain and what's the relationship and what's the whole capturing of thoughts and renewing of the mind and what does it all mean? And people throw around the words brain and mind and thoughts and emotions and mental health, and it's kind of a big mix in the pot, and it becomes this big scary mix. And then you have all this prior to the pandemic, there was already so many issues. We discovered between 96 and 2014 that people were dying 8 to 25 years younger than they should. So this is prior to the pandemic. So already we had this major crisis looming globally with people dying from 8 to 25 years from preventable lifestyle diseases. And you think okay, well, lifestyle, we've got to look at that. And if it's preventable and lifestyle, we have to consider those two words. Preventable means you should be doing something about it, and lifestyle is something that you control. And both of those are driven by you as a person. What are you thinking? What are your decisions? What are you thinking, feeling, and choosing about all your lifestyle decisions and all that stuff? And that's gone awry over the last 40 years, even though medicine and technology have advanced, and for decades people have been living longer. Suddenly there's this reversal, and they call them deaths of despair, people dying at their peak ages, sort of between 25 and 65, when they're at their peak of their career, and just sort of getting in at the peak, and and it's from preventable lifestyle diseases. And we look back at the 40 years prior to the pandemic, and we see what's been happening, why, and we see the introduction of the industrialized food movement, so change in diet, technology, increased hurry sickness, more people being sedentary. And then we also see one of the most major changes was how we viewed people's mental health, where people's stories and narratives and complex reactions to the complex and adverse circumstances of life got simplified into these biological diseases. And suddenly our stories were just kind of boxed away and sort of lumped in the realm of disease. And any kind of emotion that was considered toxic was needed to be suppressed because it was a symptom of a disease, and that took away the humanity of people. And so then we hit this pandemic already with this crisis, and then we have the pandemic, which has chopped another year of people's lives because of the isolation and all the changes in infrastructure and financial and the grief and the uncertainty and medical. But then they're talking about another mental health pandemic. Meanwhile, mental health, so it's, if I say it like this, Rob, it's one scary thing after another, and I decided, stop the bus here. We have to bring in we have to seriously look at an alternative view and stop making people get more and more scared about mental health, which is such a part of who you are, and I try to bring in another view. So I took all my years of research, all the clinical expertise. As a scientist, you constantly update your research. So I did a couple of sets of clinical trials recently, and I summarized one of the sets, put that into the book very simplistically, with so people can get the knowledge and see, hey, when I do this with my mind, when I manage my mind, when I capture thoughts and renew the mind, I can have this kind of impact in my brain and my body and in my emotional and social and cognitive functioning on a day-to-day life. So when we have mind management, we can actually manage all these things and gain a level of peace by an improved factor of 81%. So, we can literally manage things like anxiety and depression, which are not they're not diseases. They're not some kind of thing that you can label and put in a box and treat with, medication and a bit of conditioning therapy and talk therapy. They're actually responses, and they're responses that we need to embrace to find out how we can manage them. And I show that when we have that kind of approach in my clinical trials and also my work over 38 years, then we can shift our perspective. And that perspective is so important, because instead of seeing mental health as this pandemic and COVID and the prior story that I told you, which is also scary, I didn't want to just scare people. I want to say to people, this is the reality, but this is why it's like that, and this is what you can do about it. So the book is Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, is telling all humans that if you're a human, you're a mental mess, and you know what? It's okay. It's because you're human, you're in life, the adverse circumstances of life, events, and so we cannot control them, but there is something we can control, and that's our response to them. And so we can then learn how to manage them. And it's experimental. I mean, we don't quite know how we're going to manage each thing in the next moment, but we can constantly regulate that. So as we think, feel, and choose and process, if we make a mess, we can fix it. And it's not like, oh gosh, I'm now depressed, that's it, I now need to have a clinical diagnosis, which is what they're currently offering and what they have been offering for 40 years. So people are feeling sad or depressed or anxious as a result of the pandemic or prior to, and now that plus this, that instead of addressing the causes, which is, okay, people are battling because of socioeconomic situations and political and racism, and also just people's stories. We're not teaching or helping each other to just express our stories and feel free to talk it through and get the support we need. It's all, oh, you're feeling bad, go to the doctor. But it shouldn't be like that. It's, oh, you're feeling bad, let's talk about it. How can I help you? Let's embrace this. So we have to shift that narrative to two levels. Stop medicalizing people and stop just pushing it away in a box and pretending that this is another disease that's now manifesting in society, and saying, hey, no, we're human. Life's tough. We're battling. Let's embrace these emotions. Let's look at all the reasons why people are having adverse circumstances. Let's see what we can address on a political, socioeconomic level. And then let's also equip the individual and the community on how to deal with mental health. So that's the narrative I bring to the table. And in this book, I show how you do that. What is mind? What are thoughts? What are emotions? All this stuff. And how can you self-regulate? Because, Rob, at the end of the day, you wake up with your mind, you go to bed with your mind, you get dressed with your mind, you eat with your mind, you talk to your wife and your two babies, baby on the way and your little one with your mind. We're talking, using our mind now. Our mind's always working. You can go 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without oxygen, but you don't even go 3 seconds without thinking. So thinking, feeling, and choosing.
When I read that, that's phenomenal. So we don't go longer than 3 seconds without thinking.
Not even, it's even less. I use that as an analogy. I should probably say 1 second, not even a split second. We are never not thinking.
Gosh.
And if you think about the, sorry, go ahead.
No, just in response to a blog I read of yours a while ago, you were talking about along a similar train of thought, and I tried to capture in 20 seconds how much I actually think about. It's phenomenal what I can think about in 20 seconds.
Unreal.
And how my brain can leap from one subject to another, to a judgment about myself to a judgment of another. Where do we start?
I know it's absolutely, and it's absolutely amazingly beautiful. So we're doing that. So my proposal in Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, based on all the science, nothing that I say isn't science, and science is totally spiritual. It's two sides of the same coin. Yes. So science comes from the word sclera. We spoke about this before, which means knowledge, and God is the source of all knowledge. So when I talk about science, it's the how-to. How do you do what you're supposed to do? Yes. So if you think about that, and if you think about the fact that we're always thinking, always feeling, always choosing, we then need to just get into the mindset that, okay, well, if that's the case, that's the source of the lifestyle issues. It's the source of everything that I'm doing. I'm always doing it. What is it? And if you know what it is, if you know what mind is, and you know how to self-regulate it, then you can give yourself the grace to make the mistakes and to fix them and to deal with the issues of the past and to kind of run the moment by moment, day-to-day things. Does that kind of sort of make sense? I mean, we can really unpack this in depth.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, you give language to the solution to this mental mess in the book. You call it a neurocycle, don't you?
Yes.
I know you spend hundreds of pages unpacking this concept, but could you, for our viewers, just explain the concept and just a little bit about the 5 steps? You talk about 5 steps, just as much you'd like to share about this solution to clearing up our mental mess.
Okay. No, it's a great question. So if I say to you that your mind is always thinking, and as you so rightly said, you for 20 seconds you just wanted to think about see what you were thinking of. Our capabilities as a human to think, feel, and choose is ongoing, and it's amazing, and it's huge, and yet we can do it because we're still standing. We're still having conversations. Yes, sometimes it's we have tough times and so on, but we still keep going as humans. So it's a very natural thing. So the underlying premise, therefore, is if this is what we're always doing, and if this is what we're supposed to be regulating, which we can see from the Bible, because it says, "Bring all thoughts into captivity." So those numerous thoughts that you've thought about in those 20 seconds, theoretically, we're supposed to be analyzing, are those effective? Are they productive? Are they hurting you? Are they hurting someone else? Are they growing you? Are they repairing? Are they destructive? And that's what we want to be doing all the time. And we see from scientific research that we can actually do that every 10 seconds. Now, I'm not asking you to, put your stopwatch on and here's my phone and put your stopwatch on and every 10. You can't live like that. But the principle operating is that you can, when you're conscious, which is when you're awake, you can self-regulate your thinking, feeling, choosing. So to answer the question of what the neurocycle is, I'd like to just quickly remind the listeners, and I know I spoke about this last time, but I think it's worth just differentiating once again between mind and brain.
Definitely.
And then talk from there into self-regulation and the 5 steps. And would that be good with you?
Absolutely.
So can I use some analogies and things?
Please.
Can I some props and things? Okay, so the viewers, it's audio and visual, so I can describe. Okay, so I can describe. So I'm holding up a brain, but it's not a real one, in a skull, and we hear a lot in our current sort of the language of mind brain. We hear that mind and brain are the same thing, so they use interchangeably, but they're not. So the very first thing in understanding the neurocycle is that you are not your brain. The brain is not a generator. If you dead, your brain disintegrates. Your brain and your body form about 1% of who you are. But your mind is the other 90 to 99%. So your mind is the spirit soul. If you want to put it into Christianese, it's your spirit soul, and then here's your body. And there is this intimate relationship between them. Now, we know already from the work done by Einstein and some of his colleagues, and even before that when you're alive, you actually generate these photons. And these photons are coming from a field around humans. So we've all got this field, and you can feel that sometimes if you brush past someone, you get that electrostatic shock. That's the field that's around all of us. There's also, that's another example of this is, let's say that you wake up in a great mood and then you phone up some friends and they're all just moaning and groaning and they're totally depressed, or you in a conversation, and I know it's lockdown, so you're not physically with people, and they're all depressed, and suddenly you feel depressed. So their negative thinking and feeling and choosing, and the negative thoughts that they've been building are basically being emitted by what they're saying, and you feeling that's photons. You're literally getting photons that are hitting you from their gravitational field. So mind is this field thing. Mind is this gravitational field that's around us, and it moves through us. And mind with spirit soul, I'm using mind for spirit soul. Mind needs the physical to be able to express itself. So you express your spiritual nature through the brain and the body. So it moves through the brain, and then the brain and body respond. So as you listen to me now, so I'm going to make this so simple. I'm speaking, you speaking. People are seeing us, some people are just hearing us. So there's sound waves and electromagnetic light waves. That's what the voice, the words we're saying are going to be received as. What are they received by? Your mind. What is your mind? How you think, feel, and choose. So you are thinking, feeling, and choosing at 400 billion actions per second what you are hearing me say. And that is happening on a non-conscious level. It's on a very deep spiritual level. So consciously, you're aware of this every 10 seconds, but non-consciously, it's happening at 400 billion actions per second. So you're doing this amazing processing. This is how we can think about so much at once. And that processing is happening in these gravitational fields. So this think, feel, choose stuff is happening around you. And then you push it through your brain and your body. So it's like a grab, and then there's this processing thing, and that processing then moves through your brain, and your brain responds electromagnetically and neurochemically and genetically, and converts my words into little protein structures, little branched protein structures that look like trees. So I always use the little talked tree as an analogy.
Yes.
So as a tree, so that you're growing thoughts that are made of proteins. So this is what a thought looks like. It looks like a tree. So right now you are growing a thought in your brain through your mind, processing the information, pushing it through the brain, and you're growing a tree in your brain about what I'm saying, and you're doing that at 400 billion actions per second. So you're converting sound waves into actual physical structures. I mean, it's a major genesis moment happening. And you do this all day long. And these are thoughts. So you think, feel, choose, build. What do you build? You build thoughts. So thoughts are the consequences of what we are paying attention to, what we are, the experiences of life. Now, when you think of a tree, it's got roots, a tree trunk, and branches. So as you introduced me, and as you introduced me, you would have, in inverted commas, sown the seed. This is about mind, brain, mental health, Dr. Leaf, whatever. And then as we started conversing and I started speaking, that's the origin story. So that's the roots of the tree. So the source where the information is coming from, you're building all those roots made of protein. So the words are being processed. So the first thing you build are roots. And that's the origin story. That's what I'm saying. Then as soon as you grow them, you automatically grow the tree trunk, or the little trunk, which is then your perspective, and then that then produces the branches, which is the data of the emotions and the behavior, but it's your interpretation of what I'm saying. So every single person listening is hearing the same origin story, but it's interpreting it in their way. So you're relating it to your own individual experience. So this looks different for everyone, which is beautiful. So these are all memories. So those are root memories, origin story, source, and those are your understanding of the information memories. So one thought is made of many memories, root memories, branch memories, and then this altogether produces what you say and what you do. So this is a healthy thought. So from this conversation, it's really cool. From this conversation and listening to this podcast, people will then maybe go chat to someone and say, hey, thoughts are real things in your brain, whatever you got out of this, whatever's over here, you will then talk about whatever's here, from here. And so that's healthy. But now let's say that you don't stabilize this. Within 24 to 48 hours, most of this will basically convert to heat energy. But if you stabilize this thought by getting the book, re-listening to the podcast, studying this information over a period of time, and it takes at least 63 days. So that means if you keep talking about this and applying it, that's why the books, if you study the book, you're going to get this information built into your brain. You basically will then turn this into a long-term memory. Then it will impact your behavior change. So now here's the key thing. For us to mind management, which is renewing the mind, which is capturing thoughts and renewing the mind, that's mind management, is done through the neurocycle. So the neurocycle is how we capture a thought that's toxic and fix it. And so we're going to find its source, its origin, and we're going to find that through, you've got to grow, if the tree grows from the bottom to the top, and that's what we express, we've got to look at what we're doing and then track it back. And the neurocycle is helping you do that. So mind management, which is capturing thought and renewing the mind, is observing, being very self-regulated and observing what you're thinking, feeling, and choosing, and then finding out the tracking back and finding out the origin story. And what's really important about this is that we give ourselves tremendous, that the whole way you come into the neurocycle is one of, I'm human, I'm experimenting with life. I don't know what's coming up and I don't quite know how I'm going to respond, but I can learn to control it. It's okay to feel sadness and despair and anger and frustration and anxiety and all these emotions. They're not evil, bad things. They're not diseases. They are simply warning signals because our brain is wired for these. Yeah. So if we have a toxic or adverse circumstance, like the isolation of COVID, for example, which can make you feel very lonely and so on, then that is going to produce a toxic tree. So it's still all these protein structures, but they fold incorrectly and they create an imbalance in the brain and the body. And then your brain's immune system and your body's immune system, this is really interesting. We'll see this like it sees COVID or any virus in your body. This is as real to your immune system, this toxic response to, or this toxic thought, this thought which is a response to the adverse circumstances. So let's say the isolation of COVID has made you feel very depressed, and that your brain and your immune system of your brain and body will send out the same kind of immune factors it would send out for COVID. So a COVID virus, so the T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, macrophages, etc., to go and try and fix this, because this is threatening your survival, as COVID is. So your brain and body are designed to fight any kind of thing that's, so therefore, how do we pay attention to these? We get symptoms. COVID will give you symptoms. You get the symptoms of the high temperatures and the breathing, etc. The psychological side, the symptoms would be things like the emotions, so the depression, the anxiety, the frustration, the despair, the terror, the angst, all that stuff. Those are symptoms that are saying, hey, pay attention, there's something going on. And you also get, those are all symptoms or warning signals. You can also look at there's 4 different types of things that we would look at in terms of assessing, to try and unpack these things. You would look at your emotional warning signals, your physical warning signals, which are like responses in your body, like maybe tension in your chest and heart palpitations or adrenaline rushes or, panic attacks, that kind of thing. You'd look at your behavior signals, how are you relating, how are you speaking, what are your relationships like, what are you thinking about yourself, what are you saying, what are you doing, how's your work, so behavioral signals. And then you would look at your perspective, your mindset, what's your view on life. Life sucks, I hate life, it's hopeless. So you pay attention to all of those in a very non-judgmental way. So we've got to keep telling ourselves all the time that it's okay, I'm a human and I'm in an adverse circumstance. I'm not ill, I'm not crazy, I'm just responding. And I keep stressing that because the Western philosophy is one of, if you have those emotions, there's something wrong with you and you've got to quickly suppress them and push them away. And and what they even saying, if you read the papers and if you read the scientific papers and if you read the media, and majority, the UK is a little better than the States, but you'll see that the answer to the mental health pandemic is diagnosis and treatment, which means that here you are experiencing loneliness, but you're getting told now that, okay, how do we, instead of saying, let's address your loneliness, let's have a look at your loneliness, let's address it, let's see how, let me give you an understanding, and that's okay, let's rewire that, and let's work out a solution. Instead of that, they're saying, okay, that loneliness that doesn't matter. What matters is you've got depression. So you're clinically depressed, so let's give you medication to fix that. That's not the solution. That's going to add to the problem that we currently enter the pandemic with, which is people dying 15 to 25 years younger. Because you can't suppress this whole experience of you using your body, and that's what they're doing. They're taking all of that 99% away and saying it's all about just the physical. And the physical is important, but it's not important without the mind. So I haven't got into 5 steps yet, but that's kind of laid a foundation. And I know you've got some questions, so fire away.
Well, firstly, thank you. That's so comprehensive and clear with the visuals and you're explaining it. I just want to quickly camp on the 63 days, did you say, to form a habit? I'd love you to unpack that, because I hear so many myths, 21 days, 28 days. I know University College here in London started to say it was 60 plus days to form a habit. And do you think the reason it takes 60 plus days is perhaps why people choose to go for the immediate relief of medication as opposed to doing, may I say, the hard work of the process of deconstructing the toxic thoughts and reconstructing healthy, God-given thoughts?
Absolutely. You're totally 100% right. So to answer the question back to front, I'll answer the last part first. Our technological age has definitely created a quick fix mentality. 40 years ago, we didn't have quite the same quick fix mentality. We've developed hurry sickness and quick fix over the last 40 years. So our millennials and our youth are, Generation Z and X and Y, I think it's X and Y, are growing, have I said them right, are growing up into this generation with this quick fix mentality and with a very biological approach to life. And that is a problem, okay? So that's the one thing that we have to change. Your mind we've got to come at it from this logic. If your mind's always working, like we said, it doesn't even stop for a second. If you don't regulate it, it's still working, but then it's working in a messy way. So if you don't want to do the hard work of 63 days cycles to clean up the mental mess, then you're just going to stay in 63-day cycles without even, and getting more messy. So, you know, if you look at it like that, it's happening anyway. I'm just saying rather control it and make it, you know, get a handle on the mess. You know, so yes, so those are the two. We've got to change that logic and that narrative, and we've got to recognize what we are dealing with here. And so then that's the one. So the other side is, yes, there's very few people that have actually researched the time it takes for memory to form. You see, I know about the University College London studies. There's a couple of other studies there's a handful. And mine, I just did one recently, and it's in here, where I tracked over time what happens in the brain and what happens in terms of neuroplasticity. And what you see happening in 3 weeks is you'll see what we call gamma peaks, and that means that we get certain types of peaks of energy in the brain at a 3-week period, which shows that you've actually deconstructed and you've reconstructed. You've made something new. You've made a kind of new thought. So the thought is building over those. It takes around about 3 weeks to identify, so to capture and to deconstruct and embrace, process and reconceptualize. And it's more or less at 3 weeks that happens. Interestingly enough, our body also heals in cycles of 3 weeks, but it doesn't end there. Like if you have a blister, it'll take around about 3 weeks for your immune system to send out the immune factors and the stem cells and so on to fix up the blister. That's if you have your mind right. If your mind's not right, that number will reduce by 60%. So it'll take you almost twice as long to heal. So if our body's healing slows down, if our mind's a mental mess. I mean, that's how impactful the stuff is. But 21 days is not enough time to change a behavior. So it's enough time to create neuroplastic changes. Neuroplastic changes are happening now in the instant, but sustainable neuroplastic changes take around 21 days. But to turn that change into something that actually has a sufficient energy and power to impact behavior change, so that you see changes in how your habit and your patterns and your thinking, your cognitive, social, emotional, etc., that takes another 42 days at least. And that's where the 9-week comes in. So it looks like it's 3 cycles of 21. That initial 21 came out of a comment made by a surgeon, and I put that in the book, I think in the 50s or 60s, talking about how a patient healing from a wound. But it got picked up and became part of the popular myths. One of the myths that it takes 21 days to form a habit. Doesn't. 21 days to form a sustainable thought, but it's not strong enough yet, sustainable enough yet to actually impact behavior. That requires more work. The hardest work happens in the first 3 weeks. I mean, our hardest work, I'm talking 15 to 45 minutes a day. It's nothing. It's nothing. You do the 5 steps of the neurocycle for 15 to 45 minutes for 21 days. And then from day 22 to 63, you just do the 5th step. It takes you a minute a day. So I'm talking about 1 minute a day for 42 days to transform a behavior. And most people, Rob, will stop around day 4 to day 7, because you kind of start thinking, hey, I got this. And especially by day 4, a lot of people will get to about 2 weeks, and you get the mastery mirage concept happening where you think, hey, I've got this, but you don't. And then they stop, and then they go back, and I'm stuck. Because people don't push. People get stuck because they don't push through long enough. So we've got it. That's the narrative I bring in there as well, and that's how I arrange everything. That's how my research was done in cycles of 9 weeks and so on.
So helpful. So I know we don't want you to give away those 5 steps, because we want people to pick up the book, and we'll find out in a moment how we can do that. But give someone watching obviously the first step is pick up the book.
Absolutely.
But give them a second step, like a practical thing they can start immediately, Caroline, when they get off this interview. They can start immediately as they wait for that book to arrive in the post.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing, I don't mind telling you what the 5 steps are, but they're very simple, but they are based on 38 years of research, heavy science, and each step is going to do certain very special things in your brain. And so they, don't skip a step, and don't think you can fiddle around and do them. You do them exactly like that, within the patterns that within the system. It's a system. It's not a therapy technique. It is. And the second half of the book, I explain exactly how to do it with lots of applications, like how to use it with toxic trauma and toxic habits and building new habits and brain building and the day-to-day stuff, like in the moment. What do you do in the moment if you have an argument and you've got to go into a business meeting? How do you get your head back on? And so that moment by moment stuff, you're about to go and do something, and then you read something or someone says something to you and you get thrown. How do you get yourself back together again?
So the 5
So the neurocycle is those moment by moment things. And it's also, the more you do them, the more you learn to regulate that example you gave in the beginning of the how many thoughts you think in 20 seconds. Because what I didn't say, and I'm going to give the 5 steps, what I didn't say is that how many thoughts do we build in a day? We've somewhere in the region of 8 to 10,000. But in building those, we will bring up probably another 10,000. So we probably have anything from 18, and some scientists think it's up to 50,000 thoughts combined, ones that are existing, moving into consciousness and being adjusted, and the ones that we're building. So there's a lot going on, and that's why we need to manage it. And the neurocycle helps you manage that. It doesn't replace therapy, it enhances therapy. If you go to therapy, which is great, excellent coaching, counseling, that's only maybe once or twice a week. You're living with yourself 24/7. What are you going to do with yourself 24/7? That's what this is teaching. It's teaching the basic principles of mind management for whatever age. You've got a young child, teach them. My kids started learning this at 2 and 3. And we've got a book coming out in the future, but I've got there is in the neurocycle app, there's an app that goes with it, and I've got a section for how to apply this to kids, and we've got one for how to apply this to neurocycling for brainy tots, whatever. It's all coming out. There's all books that are coming out with this as well, but learn this in the meantime. Okay, so the biggest thing is your mindset that you go in, the attitude that you go into this work with. Don't have this Western philosophy that those things are emotions are bad. See whatever you're going through as something that's okay because you're human. Even if you've been nasty to someone and you feel guilty, even that, you're not going to run from it. You're not going to get into condemnation and shame. You're going to own it in terms of, okay, well, I do feel guilty. Let me take that guilty energy. Energy is never lost. Let me transfer it into constructive energy that I can now work out. Why do I feel the guilt? Because I said that. What can I do? Where did that come from? Okay, what am I going to do about it? And then I can move forward. So the 5 steps would be to have this mindset of not feeling guilty, of being very objective, being very accepting, thinking, well, listen, someone else has been in this position before. I'm not the first person to be nasty, or the first person to fight with my husband, or the first person to fight with my wife, or or get upset about a financial thing. This is humans. So and I know I'm stressing that, but I cannot stress it enough. The second thing is coming to this, and these aren't the steps, these are just the preparation phase. Coming to this with a state of mind of you being a pilot and a co-pilot. Both you're two. We have this phenomenal ability that to stand back and observe our own thinking. I call that the MPA. I explain it in here. Multiple perspective advantage. We have been designed with multiple perspective advantage. We can stand back, tap into the wisdom that's at our inner core. We're made in God's image. So at our inner core, we are love. And then we have free will. We can think, feel, and choose. So the middle of this of our forest of all our thoughts is this perfect forest, which is made in God's image, which is how we connect to the spirit of God and wisdom. That's the co-pilot. We need to have, in every situation, we need to say, okay, the messy pilot, the pilot who's the messy one, is experimenting and needs a bit of help, always needs help from the co-pilot. So when we talk about self-regulating, always go into this pilot, co-pilot. You're flying this helicopter time machine type thing, and you're flying it over the forest of your mind. And you're looking for signals, and it's okay. It's normal. That's how we do life. That is capturing thoughts. So we find, what thought must I capture? That thought I must capture because there's guilt coming off it. That's the warning signal. I land with the co-pilot. The co-pilot's the wise one saying, hey, Caroline, why are you feeling guilty? And then Caroline looks at the tree and looks at the difference. It gathers awareness of the emotional warning signals and then starts to reflect, which is the second step. And then you write. There's a very specific way that you write that taps into both sides of the brain, called a metacog. It's in here. There's a video in the app. Then you recheck what you've written, and then you create an action plan. And you do that in the 15 minutes. So you would spend 3 minutes or so on each step. If you're doing the 15 to 45 minutes, if it's 45 minutes, you can obviously spend longer. You limit the time because this is hard work and you don't want to get emotionally overwhelmed. And the 5th step it anchors you in a state of peace, and you would then basically do that for the rest of the day. That's for the long stuff. And then in the moment, you can do those 5 steps. As I said, if you just have an argument and you've got to get in front of a camera, you can do those 5 steps just quickly to get your head back on in 5 seconds. So I show you how to do all of that in here.
You've created a masterpiece. I don't say this about many books.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I can't think of a single Christian that doesn't need this book. Young, old, male, female. I think every single Christian struggles with their thought, their mindset. I just think it's an absolute game changer. How can people pick it up Caroline, when can they pick it up, and how can people continue to reach and receive your ministry?
Thank you so much. Rob, they can pick it up wherever books are sold. So, Amazon UK, and wherever people, they watch you around the world. So wherever you buy books, you can go to cleaningupyourmentalmess.com, and that'll take you to all those links. My Instagram handle is Dr. Caroline Leaf, and from there you can access everything. My webpage, drleaf.com. The book's available now, Rob, wherever books are sold. My podcast is called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. So there's lots of places where they can get lots of help.
Well, Dr. Caroline, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing the concept of the book. And I just think I'm really excited about this book, and I just think it's going to help so many people. So look forward to seeing you again, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Bye.